Hello everybody, I'm KC and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about some Ducktales. Still no new episodes, right? Good, I still have time to catch up. Don't get me wrong, guys, I'm excited that Season 3 is finally on its way, but as Anthony C. once elegantly observed, critics and reviewers are probably the only fans of these things who are quietly hoping for it to be postponed a little bit. Especially if you're a reviewer who wasn't in a position to make regular videos for several months, during which some of the best and most influential episodes of the entire series aired. Just hypothetically. Yeah, I still have a lot to do, which is why I'm doing something a bit different with possibly the most important development of the second season, the proper introduction and return of Della Duck. More than anything else in the DuckTales reboot, this was uncharted territory, since the most Della had ever featured in before this was a European comic strip explaining why she's not in her son's lives. So they had the freedom to make her whatever they wanted, and the pressure to live up to something everyone's always wondered about these kids: where is their mother? Season 2 not only had the task of properly introducing and establishing this character for the first time, but after learning what she did in the last Crash of the Sun Chaser, they might have even had to win some fans over who had a low opinion of her. Now, there is no way to talk about Della's role in the show with just one of her episodes, and I really don't want to make a bunch of separate reviews on them because that would take forever at this rate. So instead, we'll be covering the Della Trilogy, where she's been all this time, how she got back, and what happens when she finally reunites with her family. I usually don't cover episodes this way, but hopefully this will work. So let's start this journey by asking a simple question: whatever happened to Della Duck? I don't know if I need to do my usual synopsis here because it's surprisingly straightforward. From beginning to end, this episode is all about Della's time stranded on the moon, every close call, every struggle, and every attempt to get back to the family she loves so much. I think I've mentioned before that a story dedicated to a side character is an admirable risk, especially considering this episode was a break in the hiatus. But this wasn't just a character we don't see much of, this was a character we'd never seen, only heard of, and don't really know. This episode decided to dedicate itself to introducing and, more importantly, endearing Della to the audience. For me, they managed to make me love her in the first minute. Della saying "aw phooey" is my everything.
Ah, phooey.
But like I said, after hearing why Della disappeared, a lot of people thought less of her after pretty much abandoning her children to do something so reckless. But I was willing to give the benefit of the doubt. When I covered Last Crash of the Sun Chaser, I mentioned how we didn't really know the whole story here. At the time, I thought there would be more of a reason for Della taking the spear of Selene, like she was threatened or she was protecting her family or something. And I was completely wrong there. Della really was just being adventurous and, let's be real, careless, but I was right in one area. We didn't know the full story. Here, we watch Della's incredible and frankly tragic story. Yes, Della did something incredibly stupid, and she suffers the ultimate punishment, being stuck on the moon with her home in her sights, but far out of reach. All this time, she was there trying endlessly to get back to her family and feeling so awful each time she fails. We see that she loves her family more than anything. They are always on her mind. They're what keep her going every day with no one to talk to but her memories of her loved ones, and she sends infinite transmissions to them to express her love and remorse that never reach them. She made a mistake that, like Scrooge's, hurt her as much as it hurt her kids, even losing her leg in the crash. Plus, since the first half or so of this episode is just Della by herself, the video diary she keeps is a good way to have her exposit information and get to know her without having her just talk to herself awkwardly. Della's situation really adds to the drama of this episode, and as she encounters obstacles and fails multiple times to get help or get off the moon, each time really amplifies the levels of But this episode not only gives us the tragedy of Della's situation in isolation, but properly introduces Della to us as a character. Unlike almost every other character on the reboot so far, the crew were essentially working with a blank slate. Nothing had been established about Della in the past besides what happened to her, so they had pretty much nothing to work from. But they did find something. Della is, at her core, a member of the Duck family, so she has a lot of the same character traits that they do. She, of course, has Scrooge's determined and adventurous nature. She's a fun-loving walking firecracker like Dewey, and she even has a Junior Woodchuck guidebook like Huey. And we already discussed her connection to Donald.
Ah, phooey.
I think this one plan she comes up with sums up Della's personality pretty perfectly.
I'm gonna rebuild the spear of Selene. I mean, how hard can it be? It's just rocket science.
She carries the story amazingly, and after so many failed attempts and moments of lamenting her situation, you really feel for her and want so desperately for her to find a way home. I also have to credit quite a bit of Della's charm to Paget Brewster's performance. She does a wonderful job bringing this long-anticipated character to life. On a lighter note, I am convinced that at least 75% of the reason they stuck Della on the moon was so they could play that famous moon theme from the NES game in the background. And if you didn't recognize it, don't worry, the closed captions will point it out to you. But is it me, or is the gravity really inconsistent on this moon? I know it's a cartoon and all, but sometimes it affects Della, and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know, did anyone else notice? But I did love the idea that Della was able to survive on the moon all this time through experimental chewing gum invented by Gyro. The fact that Della is able to breathe because of oxygen-inducing bubble gum is so out there in its eccentricity, it makes perfect sense for Ducktales. And apparently Gyro has worked with Meduca Enterprises long enough to be in charge of constructing the Spear of Selene, and Della isn't a fan of his. And apparently the feeling's mutual. But it turns out that after years of being stranded on the moon and excavating it for resources, Della isn't alone here. In fact, there's an entire society living here. We've got moon people. Did they give this race a name? Huh, guess not. Well, individually they have great names, Lunaris and Penumbra. In Della's defense, they were apparently in hiding and well cloaked all this time. I do love when they introduce the entire secret civilization on the moon. Della gets just as frustrated that she never managed to find it as the audience probably was, so they get away with it to me. But Della found out about the moon people while trying to fight off a monster that's been tormenting her all these years. During this confrontation, she finds out the creature was just trying to protect and look after her child, which of course really resonates with Della, and she resolves the situation with the moment the DuckTales crew ruined the moon theme forever by making it really, really sad and beautiful.
Unafraid of the unknown, because I'll face it all with you.
Who's crying? I'm not crying. How Della chooses to resolve the issue with the Moon Mites also speaks volumes about her character. Some might call it predictable considering how many heroes out there choose to put the needs of others ahead of their own, but this thing has sabotaged Della's plans for years, and moments before destroyed her only way off of the moon. So the fact that Della still connects with her says a lot about her. Della gives up her only chance to get home to help the Moon Mite and its child, showing her compassion and understanding. She could also be reaching out to make up for putting her need to explore the stars ahead of being there for her own kids. To forge a connection to someone after so long with this love that she hasn't been able to share with her own children. But that might be me digging too deep into this. As a whole, it's a really touching and emotional moment and presented beautifully. Because of how she tamed the Moon Mite, Lunaris offers for Della to live with them, and thanks to their ridiculous abundance of resources, she can finally properly repair the rocket and get back home. And we'll see how that goes in The Golden Spear, which was like 4 episodes later. I honestly didn't think we were going to revisit Della's story that quickly, but it's nice that they aren't dragging this out. Now, The Golden Spear does have a subplot going on, so I will be talking about that as well. Thankfully, it's not too complex. Donald is trying to find time to relax, but his family's dangerous supernatural antics keep interrupting his much-needed downtime. I might get a lot of flack for this, but this was absolutely hilarious. I know in the reboot, Donald is everyone's best guardian who needs to be protected, but I'm sorry, Donald Duck just makes suffering amusing. It's what he's built for. It kind of felt to me like Donald's classic cartoons. He tries to kick back and relax, and over-the-top shenanigans keep interfering with that. Except here, those interruptions have been cranked up to 11. From an interdimensional goat demon to Dewey becoming Hermes' replacement, seeing Donald get more and more stressed out is funny in its own way. But seeing Donald overly stressed and molting because of all this probably makes you feel more bad for him than those classic shorts would. And the fact that Donald has gotten into such a state from all this might explain why he's not on more adventures. Though I'd say all of this is worth it for the moment Huey and Webby raise the dead like Dipper trying to prove a point, where we get quite possibly Donald's most badass moment in the entire series.
Groovy.
Only fault I have with this episode is that they didn't have Donald say that line. In fact, it may be the biggest missed opportunity of DuckTales so far. But if you felt bad that they put Donald through all of that, the resolution of the story is really a triumph for Donald fans. The rest of the family recognizing the poor guy's distress and send him off on a cruise as a token of their appreciation, giving him the opportunity to relax that he hasn't had before because he was looking after the boys. But now, he's not the only one doing that. It's a very sweet and deserving moment to show how far the Duck family has come. So that's that story. Let's check back in with Della, where she's living among the moon people. Man, these guys really need a species name. As she works to repair the spear of Selene, much to the annoyance of Penumbra. When Donald's suffering isn't making me laugh, this one-sided rivalry Penumbra has with Della is. I don't know if Della was always this eager and friendly, or if she's just really enjoying having someone else to talk to, but it's fun to watch how much she wants her and Penumbra to be best friends, and hearing her recount memories of her family and adventures on Earth to the rest of the moon people. Della's stories enrapture them so much that they grow to admire Della and her home planet. Although why she brought a slap bracelet with her on her intergalactic joyride, I have no idea. But none of this makes Penumbra's feelings towards her any better. Penumbra is a no-nonsense soldier who hails the greatness of the moon above all else. She doesn't trust Della, and the fact that she not only has to house her while she's living with her people, but that said people grow to love Della so much aggravates her to no end. Man, how does this episode make suffering so much fun? Once again, I'd have to attribute this amusement to her voice actor, Julie Bowen, who you might recognize as Rapunzel's mom. While I doubt they were ever in the same room together, she and Paget Brewster work incredibly well together, and I think their performances are what keep the scenario in the classic SpongeBob and Squidward territory, and not the modern SpongeBob and Squidward territory. But it's not all laughs. One thing that really struck a chord with me is when Della tells the others how much she can't wait to go on adventures with her sons. And it's pretty sad that the kids have already been on all the adventures Della wants to take them on. It shows just how much Della has missed, and it really made me feel for her. But we don't have to be sad for long, because Penumbra just can't take it anymore and tricks Della into leaving without the moon people who wanted to go with her. But with Lunaris' assurance, Della takes the chance and goes home. Yeah, Della's already on her way back to Earth. I thought for sure we were going to have to wait until at least the season finale for this to happen, but no, there's no more obstacles, nothing else standing in her way. The very last shot of this episode is Della Duck at the gates of McDuck Manor. This is kind of incredible, and I was floored as I was watching it happen. But I guess the DuckTales universe runs on the rule of equivalent exchange, because once Della makes it back, Donald finds her rocket on his way to his cruise, frantically tries to find her, and accidentally activates the rocket and launches himself into space.
Oh, come on!
Again, I know this made a lot of people mad, and I get it, but I'm sorry. I thought this was really funny. I mean, it's Donald Duck. What did you expect? This kind of thing happening to him is in his theme song.
Who gets stuck with all the bad luck? No one but Donald Duck.
It's amazing how the final moments of an episode can make you feel both very touched and very annoyed. But now that she's back on Earth, we should know that nothing can stop Della Duck. This is it, the moment we've all been waiting for since we saw Della's picture in the very first episode. Unless you're waiting for the reunion between Della and Donald, that's gonna take a while, as this episode keeps reminding us. You know, the first couple of minutes of this episode really illustrates how DuckTales can blend in comedy without cutting the emotional value of a moment. From Della being starry-eyed at being home again while Donald is blasting off in the background, to her first interaction with her family in 10 years being insanely awkward and adorable, but incredibly sweet and moving. It's impactful, but not overly goofy or melodramatic. It really fits the tone of the show. Her reunion with Scrooge is perfect, and if you've been watching since episode 1 and you didn't get misty-eyed at this moment, you are either a liar or heartless. A sweet, tearful hug, getting through all the major talking points of this reunion rather quickly. Not too quick, but in the way you'd have a million questions for someone you haven't seen in a long time, but want to get through them quickly because you need more hugs. And bonus points for the silent realization of Della's leg. I love how it's this unusual yet fitting combination of sorrow at what Della went through and pride at how she persevered through it all no matter what. It's very Scrooge. And of course, her meeting the boys. Again, perfect. Dewey immediately welcomes her with open arms. Huey asks a ton of questions out of excitement and curiosity, and Louie is skeptical at first, but that doesn't last for long. A great way of displaying the triplets' personalities and giving Della an idea of what her kids are like. There's even a great touch later on where they basically recreate the boys' first meeting with Scrooge with Della. All different introductions that all have the same result: tearful hugs. I think Webby speaks for us all.
My heart! It's too full!
And there's our reaction gift for the season. So now that she's back, Della sets out to make up for lost time. Really quickly, and really forcibly, which is definitely the most interesting thing about this episode and possibly Della's journey. How long it takes her to adjust to being part of a family again. Even if they are her family, it's not going to be as easy as they think or maybe even want it to be. Della truly does love her kids and wants to be the best mom ever right away to make up for her mistakes. The problem is, she's not. At least not in the conventional sense. Della's attempts to integrate into the family are a little extreme. She gets Dewey sick, Huey hurt, and scares the kids all night with her bedtime story, which is also a story she told in the last episode, so points for continuity. This story is all about Della realizing just how much she's missed and trying so hard to have a place and a life in a family that's changed so much since she left, but finding it hard to adjust. With stuff like Beakley and Duckworth's new positions, and even having her be threatened by Launchpad, which I didn't even consider, but makes perfect sense. But I think Della is so eager to rejoin her family that none of these doubts of whether she really has a place in it anymore really surface until she overhears a family meeting. Ah, the classic and ever frustrating misunderstanding led on by eavesdropping. A cliche as old and tired as the liar revealed at the end of the second act. But in this case, it's really not that bad. Yes, it's a tired story device that no one likes, but I don't think Della would have felt much better if she had stuck around to hear the rest. And what she heard wasn't wrong or misinterpreted, just not laced with the patience the family is willing to give for Della to adjust. Unfortunately, as we've seen so far, Della's not a very patient person. She charges in to get results, which sometimes, most of the time it seems, makes things worse. Like awakening an ancient mechanized monster in the garage to save her family so she can prove her worth. What? Are you expecting me to be surprised? It's Ducktales. Just like how I'm not surprised at all that Scrooge has Excalibur as a lawn decoration. But I gotta admit, I find Scrooge's way of trying to reason with Della amusing.
You've only been here for a day. You can't force a relationship with your kids just through monster fighting.
Why not, Mr. Moneybags? That's what you did.
You're Mr. Thickety, thick face from Thick Town, Thickania.
Anyway, this confrontation with the Gilded Man isn't long, but it's great. It has some great teamwork between the boys and their mom, getting on the same wavelength and working together to defeat it. Della even detaches her leg to protect Louie. It's a very sweet moment that displays how much she loves her kids, even if she needs some time to get to know them better. And that's what this episode's all about. Love, patience, and adapting. I really appreciate the acknowledgement of how everything is different now. That despite how happy they all are to be in each other's lives, Della and the family will need some time to adapt to fit this new relationship. And that's okay. It's also an episode that really takes advantage of having an ensemble cast, showing multiple ways of processing trying to welcome back this long-lost family member. From love, to enthusiasm, to curiosity, to reluctance. Covering a spectrum of reactions to this very unconventional reunion. It's the kind of episode that, as much as I adore it still, Gravity Falls probably could have used near the end of its run. If you're one of the few people subscribed to this channel who haven't watched Gravity Falls, I won't say why, but reassess your life, and anyone who has likely knows what I'm talking about. So now with the entire family reunited, we can wrap up this discussion on Della Duck. Oh, no wait, Donald's still hurtling through space. And now he's the one trapped on the moon, and a prisoner of the moon people. Terrific. I'm sure that will please so many viewers. Actually, before I go, I think we need to address what happened when Della left the moon. Lunaris is a two-faced war instigator. Turns out he was only using Della to get his people attached to her, only to lie about why she left to convince them to wage war on Earth. I gotta say, I did not see that coming. This is really clever and devious when you think about it. Lunaris turned his people's docile affection towards Della into betrayal and a hatred for life on Earth, and using the trust he built with Della to trick her into giving him the plans to the Spear of Selene, giving them a means to invade the Earth, manipulating Della, Penumbra, and his entire species to prove his strength as a ruler of a not planet. Lunaris may be one of the most terrifying Disney villains to come around in a while, just for how uncomfortably and brilliantly he can wear a false face. When you give what he's capable of enough thought, it's really unsettling. And no one is shaken by this more than Penumbra. She was always just looking out for her people and her society, and she believed Della would corrupt that, but Lunaris ended up doing that, while Della was just trying to be her friend. Really, most of Penumbra's fears about what Della would do to her people are what Lunaris, her commander, confidant, and person she probably trusted more than anyone, ended up doing. This was the beginning of a very intense and slowly growing conflict that would be our countdown to the season finale. But I think that's a good place to wrap up. Let's get back to Della. Overall, Della's debut and return in DuckTales 2017 was a wild ride. A powerful roller coaster of emotion for this new character many would grow to love, and the ones we already knew so well. Whatever happened to Della Duck was a huge but necessary risk. Dedicating an entire episode to a character we didn't really know, but were very curious about. It needed all that time to introduce Della and her struggles for us to fully understand and become attached to her, and they pulled that off beautifully. I know Della had her detractors before, but I've hardly seen any since this episode, and to change so many people's minds like that is a feat in and of itself. The Golden Spear had one surprise after the other. Della making it home so soon was surprising but welcome, Lunaris' true intentions are a gripping twist, and Donald being shot into space in Della's place is awful, I know, but I'm sorry, it's really funny. This episode essentially set up the rest of the major obstacles we'd have in season 2. Nothing Can Stop Della Duck is an emotional and complicated reunion, and isn't shy to admit that just because you love and want to connect with someone, it might not happen right away. And again, that's okay. Not to mention that the animation brought such atmosphere that amplified those emotional moments, especially in Della's debut, where the moon doesn't offer a lot of interesting locations, but they use that to their advantage, and the voice acting was incredible all throughout. I truly believe that Della wouldn't have won viewers over as quickly as she did if it wasn't for Brewster's amazing range and performance. Outside of the series premiere and the eventual series finale, these are quite possibly some of the most important episodes the show will produce to tell its story, and in my opinion, they knocked it out of the park. So there you go, 3 episodes in 1. As always, let me know what you guys thought of any of these episodes, and also let me know what you think of this format. If you guys like it, maybe I can use it again for other episodes with similar connections to help me discuss the rest of the season. But until then, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.